Tehuti Ma'at, bringing you truth. I'm Aust NeferKa, aka Nef, and if it's your first time here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. We're going to talk about the frenemy and why it is that we attract frenemies. Okay, and this is really deeply connected to the sister wound. What the sister wound is, I'll get into more detail about that a little further into the video. But what we're going to start off with is we're going to talk about what a frenemy is, essentially, which is, your classic, friend that's also your bully, friend that's also your biggest hater, friend. And I mean, it's usually not something that's outright, like they're not wearing it on the forefront. It's usually something that's behind the scenes, right? You sense the subtle jealousy, just manipulation tactics, a lot of different things that happen. So one of the reasons why the question, why is it that we attract the frenemy, is because we have to first begin with accountability. Now, this is the perfect energy cycle that we're in right now, currently, as this video is being recorded, to actually explore our relationships. We have a lot of celestial energy, right? Just the actual astronomy of where and how we're moving through cycles currently on the planet. There's a huge, beautiful influence. So I'll speak about that as well, just slightly, because we have the lunar nodes that shifted into Amun, which is Aries, and Ma'at in the south node. Ma'at is Libra, and Ma'at really rules and governs relationships, partnerships, our connections, right? And specifically those more like one-on-one connections. Now, Amun is really about our self-expression. And because we're being moved into self-acceptance, which you can watch the video that we did about the lunar nodes shifting us into self-acceptance through our connections and relationships in the video, and I'll put it into the description. Now, Danny and I touched on this in detail, so I'm not really going to go into this. We're going to focus more so on this aspect of the frenemy and why it is that we attract it. And the way that we have to first start with self-accountability, that access of energy when we're dealing with Aries and Libra, right? Amun and Ma'at. And Amun and Ma'at, for those who might be your first time here, those are the ancient African origins of these energies, right? So when we look back to, even to this day in what we call modern day Egypt, you literally have temple walls. You can go to the temple of Heteru in Dendera and literally see all of the zodiac signs and, even the origins of, right? Prior to that, because ancestrally we really focused on a more vast cosmological perspective beyond the microcycles of the elliptic that we consider to be the zodiac that most of us are familiar with, which is the Greek interpretation of that. Unfortunately, they took the original carving work of art from the temple in Dendera, and it's currently at the Louvre in Paris. But that's a whole nother story. Either way, these are ancient African terms, so I want to familiarize you with them. If you are interested in learning more about this, you can also check in the description, because we are putting out our Kemetic Zodiac course, and we're also going to be extending onto Navigating Eternity, which is already orienting you to solar and cosmic cycles of time that are rooted in our ancient African worldview, which is cosmic. So these things are foundational, because anytime we're approaching something, the method and our perception of it is key. We focus here on cultivating and restoring our African worldview because we've been oriented into a Eurocentric worldview, which is inherently linear. So what we need to focus on is holistic thinking, which when we look at all indigenous traditions, they are focused on aligning with nature and embracing the cyclical nature of all of existence, right? So this is really important because when we're talking about our relationships with one another, I find that some people talk about the cliche of, you know, you attract what you are. And when I say that our relationships are a reflection of us, or we should look at our relationships as a reflection, that is for accountability, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean in a linear way. It doesn't mean that exactly what you are is what you will attract, because the same way that we're operating in that universal law of, you know, attraction, so to say, we're also operating within the universal law of polarities, right? So you could literally attract your polar opposite, and that would be magnetic and still attract. So it's not that what you attract into your life, especially within relationships, are exactly what you have within yourself. It could be subconscious. It could be even just something you need to directly confront and face and embrace about yourself through a relationship. But what I mean is more so, think of your relationships as you're walking into a fun house, and each relationship is a mirror. And depending on that perception, that position of that person, it depends on where they are, how you're going to actually see yourself. So there might be a specific mirror in your life that forces you to see something that you've never looked at before, that you couldn't have seen in any other circumstance or situation, right? So it's not necessarily that it's reflecting you because it is you. Sometimes it's just reflecting something that you need to see about yourself, right? So sometimes, for example, because it can be easy to embrace that concept when you're, depending on the stage you are in your process. If you're attracting, you know, really beautiful connections and relationships, of course they're a reflection of me. But if you're attracting toxic and unsavory relationships, then you're not necessarily going to want to take ownership of that reflection. So what I'm saying is, sometimes that toxic, unsavory thing is actually reflecting something about you in terms of needing to create boundaries. It could be expressing something to you about your insecurities, right? So these are all things to take into consideration. So every single relationship in our life right now, and I think rhythmically, we should always take inventory of what we attract into our lives, of what dynamics we're creating within our relationships, how we're being treated, how we're treating others, right? That's just a rhythmic, you know, maintenance that I think we should be doing spiritually and emotionally, right? Now, right now, like I said, is a great moment to do that. If you are attracting frenemies and you've noticed that pattern, usually it takes a while for you to notice that. You know, I can attest to this because I've attracted many frenemies, but it took a while for me to actually realize that it's a pattern, because the more space and time that we move through in a lifetime, the more we're able to see, and then we can see, okay, what kind of pattern is formulating here, right? As we zoom out, as we have more data, right? And, you know, I had someone go from being my best friend in high school to showing up with girls to my mother's house to jump me, right? So like, that to me is like a classic expression of a frenemy. And sometimes it wouldn't be out like that blatant where it would be from night to day, but there would be that subtle jealousy. And it's also important to take into consideration when you're being a frenemy and because I think the key within this dynamic is jealousy, the key emotion. You know, it's one of many, but I think it's one of the most significant ones, because jealousy tends to be an emotion that we don't necessarily want to process and deal with and acknowledge and work through and alchemize. And it's very important to recognize that jealousy is an emotion that is like all of our emotions. They're cues, okay? Sometimes, especially as wombs, we can overly attach ourselves to our emotions. to the point where some of us do not even have discernment between our intuitive intelligence and our emotions and our feelings, and what are the differences between them. And maybe I'll do a video on that separately. But it's very important to recognize that when it comes to emotions, it is important for them to be processed and balanced, right? So for Tehuti Ma'at, right, we're not just a cooperative, a revolutionary instrument creating different co-ops and doing different ventures and community service. Tehuti Ma'at, they're cosmic principles, right, that we are here to embody, right, as spiritual warriors, as people who are awakening to the fact that we came here and we have this sole purpose to prepare and to cultivate and to lead humanity into a restorative age. Now, within that reality, we have to restore Tehuti Ma'at, right? They're complementary energies. You have a masculine and a feminine energy, but they are universal law, Tehuti, and cosmic order, Ma'at. You have expression and communication and wisdom and intelligence, and you have truth, justice, reciprocity, sobriety, propriety, morality, right? So these are the energies and the forces that we have to cultivate within ourselves so that we can lead the way to them crystallizing and returning to the world after humanity has just moved through and is within a degenerate cycle. So within that reality, I say that because one of the best ways that I've learned to simplify what Tehuti Ma'at is Tehuti is the mind and Ma'at is the heart. So when we think about our emotions and our feelings, we're in our feminine, right? Ma'at. And we have to balance it with Tehuti, our masculine. Because we all, whether we are wombed or not, whether we are men or women, regardless of how we came into this world, we have masculine and feminine energy within us. Now, because we're in a degenerate cycle, that's a whole nother expression of how we deal with that in regards to gender and sex. We're not getting into that. That could be another video as well. But for right now, it's just to say that regardless, we all have this divine polarity within us. And there's a balance that we have to have in accordance with how our nature is, right? Honoring our physical body and the vessel that we've been gifted in this life. So for those of us with wombs, there's a certain biochemistry that we have within our body, right? We not only operate with our circadian rhythm, like our male counterparts, but we also operate with our infradian rhythm. So our hormonal chemistry, right? That cycle that we're moving through is also impacting how we navigate the world, what we sense and what we feel. So innately, yes, there's science, there's evidence to why we say that we tend to be more on the emotional side and why we associate emotionality with femininity. And that's not an inherently bad thing, right? But it's also not an inherently good thing. There is no good and bad. It is really about balance. And we have to learn to balance our emotionality with our mentality and be able to synthesize and know if what we're feeling is true or not, because we can feel things that are not true, right? So that being said, foundational emotions are cues. It's information, it's data, it's expressing something to our emotional body, to our spirit, for us to direct our attention to somewhere, maybe a leak, maybe somewhere where we need to put our attention and somewhere where we need to heal, more than likely, because also an expression of our humanity is, especially during, being born during a degenerate cycle, is a cycle of healing, because there's a deep need for healing, because there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of suffering on the planet. Now, pain may be inevitable, but suffering is optional, right? A wise person once said that. I don't even know who I heard say that, but I definitely heard a wise person say that, and it just resonated as pure truth. And I feel like that's very important, because when it comes to our emotions, when we choose not to live in them, but we choose to read them and honor them and sit in them and receive them and fully process them, we can fully integrate the lesson and the blessing of our emotions, because we were born in our humanity to feel. Even our males who may not be as emotionally inclined, but depending, because some of our men are also biologically being conditioned, as well as, you know, unfortunately, we have a lot of the chemicals and the different things that are influencing our body chemistry that are creating more of an effeminized reality for males as well. But nonetheless, even a standard, you know, balanced male is going to still have senses and emotions. That's part of our human experience, and it's very important that we embrace that. And it is the shunning of that that has created a pendulum swing into a complete rejection of emotionality that has created what people consider to be toxic. But it's not inherently toxic to be masculine, just like it's not inherently toxic to be feminine, right? But you can have expressions of toxicity on both sides. So what we're talking about with the frenemy right now, I'm more so speaking to a toxic feminine trait, because even if it's males, it's just inherently feminine to move with that degree of emotionality where that jealousy completely overrides. And instead of it being read as a cue, it is now creating a toxic dynamic where we are moving in an immoral way, where we may harm others and or be on the receiving end of that. So when it comes to jealousy, that's an emotion we really have to deal with, especially because we're being programmed and socialized as women to be catty towards one another. There's a reason why there's all those shows with girls fighting and throwing drinks on each other and all of that. Okay? And it's very important that we recognize that our sistership is very, very important to our healing process for our collective, our healing process as individuals, and our healing process as humanity. And specifically for those of us of African ascent, is literally part of our prophetic. Our prophecies are rooted in the resurrection of Africa, of African people, through sistership, right? So there's a reason why spiritually it is an attack. It's part of the spiritual warfare. So it's something we have to look at. So I want us to be able to really address that emotion of jealousy, because it is our spirit trying to direct us back in to ourselves. That discomfort, that feeling, right? It's showing us that we're focused too externally. We're focused on someone else's reality, someone else's circumstances that have really little to do with us. I won't say nothing to do with us, because we're all connected. That's why I said each relationship is a reflection. There are billions of people on the planet. The fact that you align with certain individuals and certain people, and you came through a certain family, and you have certain sisters and brothers and your mother and your father, all of that, the lineage that you've come through, it's a beautiful woven web, right? And it's not by chance. You know, there's a meaning to all of it, and there's a reason why these relationships are in our lives. So we have to really give attention and gratitude for those reflections and embrace them, so that we can do the work that we need to do on our spirit. Because that work, that individual, that inner work that we're doing is the outer work. It is the revolution. Healing ourselves so that we can show up more whole in all spaces and places that we move, and all the things that we create come from that more healed, whole space. Then we're able to construct that restored human experience that we're here to create, right? So it begins within. We have to do that work within. So when you're feeling that jealousy, your energy is really pulling you into yourself. And it's important to go there, because you have to address that insecurity. Why are you comparing yourself to someone else? Why are you feeling jealousy or envy? Because it could also be envy. And I know there's a difference in the distinction there, but we were just going to focus on the jealousy just for the sake of it being a key emotion in the frenemy. Now, the core of that wound that attracts that opportunity. I'm gonna call it an opportunity because every time you attract a frenemy, it's attracting an opportunity to heal that wound or to see that wound more clearly, which is usually cultivated by our first relationships of sisterhood, right? Which we want to cultivate into sistership, which we want to make a distinction there. So as we come through with sistership, our series, we're going to really dig into a lot of this, me and Sister Tanu. So for now, it's just very important for you to know that you have to go back to what are those key foundational relationships within your life that formed your impression of what it is to be sister, right? Because that's what the feminine on feminine, the woman on woman, sister to sister connection is. It's a reflection of that first sister, right? So for me in my personal healing journey, I had to turn to my wounds that I wasn't even conscious of from my childhood, of my relationship with my sisters, and with one of my sisters in particular, my eldest sister. So I'm not going to get too deep into that, but I will say that I started recognizing that the way that my sister was with me, even though she was over 10 years older than me, but the way that she was with me and the way that she would kind of create this dynamic of like wanting me to want her and to like love her and like want her to be, you know, big sister and like create that energy of embrace that she wanted to experience. In order for her to do that, she would create a dynamic for me where she would try to make me jealous of other little girls that would come around us so that I could be more clingy onto her and give her that energy she wanted, which is a whole nother story in terms of why she did and does that, right? Not necessarily my business. But regardless, that's the sister that I attracted. That was my big sister, my direct bloodline sister. And within that dynamic, it created a reality where she would create this dynamic of jealousy by saying things like, oh, she's gonna take your place. She's gonna be your sister. We're switching you with her. So obviously as a little girl, I'm gonna be like, start thinking of that reality, like someone could take my place and she's gonna take my sister, she's gonna be the little sister, and like the confusion that would create for me emotionally in order for me to create an attachment to my big sister to suit her energetic desire, right? So that's a whole nother thing in terms of like thinking about the dynamics of energy and how people feed on energy. So for me, that wound created a lot of different dynamics. I remember in my early, I think like first grade, but early elementary school, getting into my first fight with the girl that used to be my best friend. I don't remember what the fight was for, but that's also part of my sister wound healing, is connecting with Kayla, who was my friend from childhood that I got into a fight with. And I'm not going to talk much about that because I think that would be a beautiful thing if, you know, we do connect to tell that story and make sure it's something that she's fine with and comfortable with. But nonetheless, I started digging into those things and having those conversations with my sister and my other sister to kind of frame my childhood, talking to my brothers. I have 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters, talking to my mother, my father, getting a sense of what my childhood was like. Because for me, I was the youngest of 5, so that's a specific cultivation of my emotional experience. And a lot of our, attachment styles, the way that we connect, and the way that we're conditioned and programmed classically is really based on the dynamics and the way that we were nurtured as children that formulated our fundamental psychology and emotional patterns. So that being said, I just wanted to make that connection just as a guide, you know, as a reflection of you, a guide to guide you within yourself to explore what your sister wound may be that is creating and attracting frenemies to you. And hopefully you can shift your perspective on these frenemies, because there really is an examination around boundaries that have to be set as well, because there's another aspect of it that, you know, feeds on the frenemy, because the genuine other side of that polarity is complete love and admiration, and what jealousy can also offer energetically if you're on the receiving end. So there's definitely a lot to work with there. I don't want to get so deep into it for today. I think we covered the baseline of what I wanted to offer. I would love to hear more about your experiences and what some of your thoughts are on this, and in what direction you would like to expand the conversation if you're interested in us going deeper into this conversation. So aside from that, I just want to invite you to stay tuned to our channel. If it's your first time here and you're not subscribed, or if you've been here before and you haven't subscribed, I invite you to subscribe. We're going to be coming through with a lot of different content now moving forward, a few different series. I'm going to be bringing in a couple of the other members of the Tehuti Ma'at Militia. If you're interested in joining our community and want to know more about that, then you can go to the description, and it's on tehutimaat.org/join, and you can learn about joining our community. We have 3 different ranks. We do a lot of great work. We're a revolutionary instrument. This is just a creative communications platform as part of the cooperative institution builder. So we're creating all kinds of cooperative institutions. So if it's something that you're interested in getting involved in, or if you just want to even just begin to initiate into more deeply into your own self-initiation, your own healing process, and want support around that, if you want to learn more about your ancestral African roots and political consciousness and awakening, then I just highly recommend that you join. Anyone who joins, even if it's at the kingdom rank, you get access to the Amos Wilson Collective. It's our private server. It's the ARC, right? The African Rehabilitation Center. So you get to join our community, and you can find out more about our offerings there. We do a community connect warrior workout every month, every moon cycle. And we also do our healing ciphers, and we have other member exclusive offerings, as well as discounts and other things that you can get. If you want to be a contributor, then you'd have to be initiated at the highest rank. But if you're interested in that, we do our initiation every winter and spring. So come January, we'll be doing that through Navigating Eternity. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop us a line. You can email us, and yeah, hope to see you soon. All right. Power. Blessings.